the news to the world in an emotional video message released by Kensington Palace on Friday evening. The cancer was found after she underwent abdominal surgery in January. It was first thought her condition was benign, but follow-up tests discovered the unspecified form of cancer. In her message, Catherine said the diagnosis took her by surprise, and she and her husband William have been trying to deal with it.
This, of course, came as a huge shock, and William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family. It has taken me time to recover from major surgery in order to start my treatment, but most importantly, it has taken us time to explain everything to George, Charlotte and Louis in a way that's appropriate for them and to reassure them that I'm going to be okay.
There are reports of multiple casualties in an attack on a concert venue near the Russian capital, Moscow. One media outlet has reported that at least 14 people have been killed. State media are reporting that people dressed in military fatigues opened fire and used explosives at the Crocus City Hall, a large concert venue on the western edge of the Russian capital. Local media have reported that scores of people sought refuge on the building's roof. Posts on social media claimed the building was on fire and that plumes of black smoke could be seen rising from the location. Israel's UN ambassador has declared there will be no ceasefire in Gaza until Hamas is wiped out. His comments came after the UN Security Council failed to pass a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza after Russia and China voted against the measure proposed by the United States. The resolution called for an immediate and sustained ceasefire lasting roughly 6 weeks that would protect civilians and allow the delivery of much-needed humanitarian assistance. Israel's UN ambassador Gilad Erdan has thanked the US for putting forward its proposal for a ceasefire, but says it'll only happen when Hamas no longer exists and a ground offensive in Rafah must proceed.
The only way to achieve a real and permanent ceasefire is to eliminate Hamas's capabilities entirely. If this council has any other ideas how to dismantle the terror group without entering Rafah, we would love to hear them. We are open.
The Defence Department says it was delighted to fly Britain's Defence Secretary to Adelaide on board an RAAF Super Hornet. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
On Thursday evening, after meeting Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the Lodge, the UK's Defence Secretary Grant Shapps climbed into the back seat of an FA-18 Super Hornet for a faster ride to the AUKMIN talks in Adelaide. The Defence Department has told the ABC it was delighted to offer the fast jet experience to one of Australia's key defence partners, demonstrating an important element of this country's military capability. The UK's Royal Air Force does not operate Super Hornets, which are worth roughly $100 million.
Dozens gathered in Melbourne's southwest last night to pay tribute to a young woman whose body was found in a wheelie bin in regional Victoria earlier this month. Ruth Brooke reports.
Community members in mourning came together at the Saltwater Reserve in Point Cook to remember Chaitanya Madhagani. Many attendees were from the Telangana Indian community, which Miss Madhagani was a part of. The community has been reeling since the news of her death on March 9th, when she was found in a wheelie bin near Geelong. Victoria's Homicide Squad is continuing investigations into her death. Police say her husband has left the country. Organisers of the vigil remembered Miss Madhagani as an active member of the community who touched the hearts of many and left behind a legacy of kindness and compassion. A condolence book with messages from attendees will be sent to her family overseas.
And Tasmania's Electoral Commission predicts it could take a few weeks before the result of today's state election is officially declared. More than 150 polling places will open today to the 405,000 enrolled Tasmanian voters, although more than a quarter of them have already cast their votes at early voting centres by phone or post. Polls are projecting a clear result will not be declared tonight, with both major parties projected to fall short of a majority. The Electoral Commission says the Easter break and an expanded 35-seat House of Assembly means counting in Tasmania's complex Hare-Clark voting system will take up to 3 weeks. You're up to date with the very latest from ABC News. For more news at any time, you can download the ABC Listen app.
You're listening to ABC News Radio.
Good morning, I'm Brendan Arrow, coming to you from Gadigal land. Making news today, reports of multiple casualties in an attack in the Russian capital, Moscow. Princess Kate confirms she's being treated for cancer and calls for privacy during her treatment.
It has taken me time to recover from major surgery in order to start my treatment. But most importantly, it has taken us time to explain everything to George, Charlotte and Louis in a way that's appropriate for them and to reassure them that I'm going to be okay.
And here at home, could today's Tasmanian election really take weeks to find a winner? Rain expected in Darwin, possible showers in Brisbane and Melbourne, fine though in the other capitals. There's been a shooting attack at a concert venue on the outskirts of Moscow, and some reports say many have been killed. The number is still unclear, but video from the scene shows a lot of bodies on the ground. At least 3 people wearing camouflage opened fire at the Crocus City Hall, and there are also reports of several explosions at the venue. Video obtained by Reuters news agency shows a large blaze and smoke rising from the hall. The BBC's Russian editor, Steve Rosenberg, has more from Moscow.
This is what we know so far, that earlier this evening, a number of armed men burst into a concert hall in Moscow, the Crocus City Hall, just before a pop concert, and began shooting. The hall was packed with visitors, and mobile phone footage shows scenes of chaos, as you can imagine. You can hear the shots ringing out. Now, there are no official figures yet as to how many people have been killed, but reports of at least 12 people having been killed in this attack. The building is on fire. Possibly a third of the building is on fire, and we believe that dozens of people may still be trapped inside the building. Also reports that a number of the gunmen may have barricaded themselves inside the building. So this is still going on very much, and Russian special forces have been deployed to the scene. Also 50 ambulances have been called to the scene, so the casualty figures could well rise. As I say, no official figure yet as to how many people have been killed, but already reports suggesting that quite a few people may have been killed in this attack. We've seen mobile phone footage of people who did get out, who managed to get out to safety to the car park. So people have got out from the incident. Also reports coming in of another explosion from inside the building. So we don't know what's going on there right now, but obviously this is a very serious situation. As I said, special forces have been deployed there. The FSB, Russia's domestic security service, also has gone to the scene. Emergency services too. I would imagine it's quite a chaotic situation, right? This came completely out of the blue. I mean, interesting how a number of armed men were able to get into what is quite a prominent concert hall in Moscow, the Crocus City Hall. You would imagine that there would be tight security there, especially at this time. But obviously, these 5 men were able, if they were 5, were able to get inside. We don't know who they are. We've just seen reports that men in camouflage, armed men in camouflage, went into the concert hall and began shooting. So, as I say, we don't know who they are, and perhaps more information will come out through the evening about who the attackers actually are, and also about the casualty figures, because, as I say, no official figures now, lots of numbers appearing on social media, which we cannot confirm. But, as I say, the fact that 50 ambulances have been called to the scene, that suggests that the authorities fear that the casualty toll could be quite high.
Although there's no suggestion at this stage that these events are connected, earlier Russia launched massive drone and missile attacks against Ukraine's critical infrastructure. About 1 million people have been left without power, and at least 5 others were killed. In Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, officials say 700,000 people had no electricity after missiles damaged a hydroelectricity power plant. From Kyiv, the BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports.
This happened at dawn today. People were woken by huge explosions right across the country as missiles and drones were fired by Russia at all corners of Ukraine, and Ukraine's air defences struggled to cope. There were some 150 missiles and drones, one of the biggest barrages that this country has seen in recent times, and some of them did hit their targets. As you mentioned, the giant hydroelectric power station in Zaporizhia in southeastern Ukraine was hit several times. There are very dramatic videos of those missiles, the black outline of a missile rushing towards its target, and then fires too. We've spoken to a woman who saw the fire through her window and her house was shaking. We know that several people were killed in Zaporizhia. I've also spoken to someone up in Kharkiv, in Ukraine's second city up in the north of this country, again talking about very, very loud explosions today. I think it was the biggest barrage of missiles to hit Kharkiv, certainly its energy infrastructure, since the very beginning of this war, and that is in a city which comes under attack very, very often. So a devastating attack for Ukraine. Russia's calling it retribution, it's calling it revenge, payback if you like. But of course, remember, Ukraine has been under attack by Russia, its civilian infrastructure hit, and civilians killed here for more than 2 years in a war that Vladimir Putin and Russia have started.
The BBC's Sarah Rainsford. Now to the other story which has broken in the last hour. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing preventative chemotherapy treatment. The Princess of Wales broke the news to the world in an emotional video message released by Kensington Palace on Friday evening local time. The cancer was found after she underwent abdominal surgery in January. It was first thought her condition was benign, but follow-up tests discovered the unspecified form of cancer. In her message, Catherine said the diagnosis came as a huge shock.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you personally for all the wonderful messages of support and for your understanding whilst I've been recovering from surgery. It has been an incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family, but I've had a fantastic medical team who've taken great care of me, for which I'm so grateful. In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London, and at the time, it was thought that my condition was non-cancerous. The surgery was successful. However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present. My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy, and I'm now in the early stages of that treatment. This, of course, came as a huge shock, and William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family. As you can imagine, this has taken time. It has taken me time to recover from major surgery in order to start my treatment. But most importantly, it has taken us time to explain everything to George, Charlotte and Louis in a way that's appropriate for them and to reassure them that I'm going to be okay. As I've said to them, I am well and getting stronger every day by focusing on the things that will help me heal in my mind, body and spirits. Having William by my side is a great source of comfort and reassurance too, as is the love, support and kindness that has been shown by so many of you. It means so much to us both. We hope that you'll understand that as a family, we now need some time, space and privacy while I complete my treatment. My work has always brought me a deep sense of joy, and I look forward to being back when I'm able. But for now, I must focus on making a full recovery. At this time, I'm also thinking of all those whose lives have been affected by cancer. For everyone facing this disease, in whatever form, please do not lose faith or hope. You are not alone.
Catherine, the Princess of Wales, today announcing that she's been diagnosed with cancer. Israel's UN ambassador has declared there will be no ceasefire in Gaza until Hamas is wiped out. His comments came after the UN Security Council failed to pass a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as part of a hostage deal with Israel after Russia and China voted against the measure proposed by the United States. The resolution called for an immediate and sustained ceasefire lasting roughly 6 weeks that would protect civilians and allow the delivery of much-needed humanitarian assistance. Israel's UN ambassador Gilad Erdan has thanked the US for putting forward its proposal for a ceasefire, but says it will only happen when Hamas no longer exists and a ground offensive in Rafah must proceed.
Colleagues, this council has expressed its concern over an operation in Rafah. But let me be clear. There is no country that seeks to avoid an operation in Rafah more than Israel. Is it your sons and daughters that you are sending into battle? No. It is our children who are making the ultimate sacrifice in defense of their homeland. From the outset of the war, Israel's goals have been clear. Return the hostages, dismantle Hamas's terror capabilities, and ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. So far, Israel has succeeded in dismantling roughly 18 of Hamas's battalions, but there are 4 remaining battalions in Rafah, with around 8,000 terrorists. Israel is fighting for her future, and if we fail to achieve our goals, Hamas will repeat October 7th again and again, as they promised publicly. Not only Hamas, by the way. Terror will prevail in our region, and this will inspire jihadist organizations all across the globe. So the only way to achieve a real and permanent ceasefire is to eliminate Hamas's capabilities entirely. And this cannot happen unless all of their battalions are demolished. You cannot extinguish a fire by putting out most of it. The fire will grow again and spread. This is what will happen without an operation in Rafah. Israel sees no alternative. The road to a permanent ceasefire passes through Rafah. If this council has any other ideas how to dismantle the terror group without entering Rafah, we would love to hear them. We are open.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says progress, though, has been made during talks in Tel Aviv with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a ceasefire plan for Gaza. During a time of strained relations between the two countries, Mr Blinken pressed Mr Netanyahu to allow more aid to pour into Gaza, where the UN says famine is imminent, and he urged the Israeli leader not to go ahead with that ground offensive in the southern city of Rafah. While Mr Netanyahu has declared the military mission will go ahead against Hamas unless all Israeli hostages are released, Mr Blinken says there was agreement on some areas and there will be further talks held with Israeli officials in Washington.
We've made progress in the last couple of weeks on the hostage negotiations, closing gaps, but almost by definition, when you get down to the last items, they tend to be the hardest. So there's still a lot of work to be done, hard work to be done, but we're determined to try to get it done. We also talked about the imperative of surging and sustaining humanitarian assistance for the people in Gaza. 100% of the population of Gaza is acutely food insecure. 100% is in need of humanitarian assistance. There have been some positive steps taken in recent days to improve the situation, but it's not enough. And we talked about what needs to happen to get much more assistance to many more people more effectively. We also talked about Rafah. We share Israel's goal of defeating Hamas, which is responsible for the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And we share the goal of ensuring Israel's long-term security. As we've said, though, a major military ground operation in Rafah is not the way to do it. It risks killing more civilians. It risks wreaking greater havoc with the provision of humanitarian assistance. It risks further isolating Israel around the world and jeopardizing its long-term security and standing. So we're looking forward to having Israeli officials in Washington next week to talk about a different way of achieving these objectives that we share, of defeating Hamas and ensuring Israel's long-term security. It really requires an integrated humanitarian, military, and political plan. As I said, we'll be talking about that next week, going through the details of what we see as the best way forward. We also had an opportunity to talk about the longer-term trajectory, what needs to happen once the conflict in Gaza is over. Conversations that I had with our Arab partners over the last couple of days and that we had here in Israel as well. We're determined that Israel succeed in making sure it can defend itself, that October 7th never happens again, that it emerge from this strong, secure, integrated in the region with a future of security and peace, not only for Israelis, but for Palestinians and for our other friends in the region. And we believe there's a path forward to do that. We'll be continuing to work to flesh out that path and to try to walk down it in the days and weeks ahead.
That's the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking in Tel Aviv after holding talks on a ceasefire plan in Gaza with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Here at home, party leaders have made their final pitches before voters go to the polling booths today in Tasmania's state election. A record 408,197 Tasmanians will have the opportunity to cast their votes by 6 p.m. tonight local time, during which the time they will choose between a record 167 candidates to decide who'll make up the restored 35-member House of Assembly. From Hobart, Adam Langenberg reports.
This election's all been about who can form majority government. Both sides say that it's within reach, despite what the polls say. For Labor, Rebecca White's been leader. She's been here before. This is her third election as leader. She fell short in 2018. She fell short in 2021. She's hoping it's third time lucky. The polls so far have Labor the wrong side of 30%, which would see them well short of a majority and could be as few as 10 to 12 seats, with 18 being that magic number you need to form majority. But here's what she had to tell voters.
There's no doubt that this election is going to be close, and we've known that for a long time. The Liberal Party can't form majority government. I think all of the indications demonstrate that after 10 years, people are looking for change. I'm asking for the community to support us so that we can form a Labor government.
Rebecca White's been here before, but this is Jeremy Rockliff's first election as leader. He ascended to the top job in 2022 when Peter Gutwein stood down. He then called this election more than 12 months early after the defections of Liberal MPs John Tucker and Lara Alexander. He says the majority government, which he so craved last time in calling this early, is within the Liberals' reach, and in fact they're the only party who can achieve it.
This is really crunch time, and can I say the Liberal Party are the only party to deliver and can deliver a majority government at the election. We are within a whisker of majority government. By any measure, the polls are saying that we are nearly there to form majority government.
The voters that we've talked to most of the time who talk about all the usual things, health, housing, education. There's also a fair bit of a cost of living flavour this time around, as there is all around the country at the moment. And there's been lots of policies from the major parties about that, whether it's making it easier to get into the housing market, whether it's getting some money back on your energy bill. There are lots of the things that voters are talking about, but also the major parties as well. The other things that have come up every now and then are around economic management. We're about to see a debt of $6.1 billion in the 2026-27 financial year in Tasmania. So managing that debt and deficit has also been a little bit part of the campaign. And then a fair bit of controversy around the waterfront stadium proposed here in Hobart, with the AFL team now having more than 150,000 members. So a big debate about the stadium and the team during the campaign as well. But let's hear from some of the minor parties, the Greens and the Jackie Lambie network, around what they say the priorities are for voters.
Well, maybe he can tell me why, when it comes to emergency housing, that my office can no longer get people that come into my office that are on their hands and knees begging me for a roof over our head, but he's more interested in putting a roof over a stadium. We have got ramping out there so bad. We've got kids not attending school. It's about priorities, and it's about priorities of people's lives.
We have to pay for extra nurses and paramedics. We have to build hundreds, thousands of affordable homes. We have to put our money into a free public transport. They're the things that we want to prioritise in the budget. You can't have both. You can't have a stadium and do that as well.
And there's been a change in the number of seats in the Tasmanian Parliament for this election. How's that going to affect the outcome?
The House of Assembly is moving from 25 seats to 35. What that means is a lowers the quota, which is the amount of votes that a party needs to get elected. There's 5 electorates in Tasmania. They'll now have 7 members in each going forward. So let's see how that shakes out. But on the face of it, what it should mean is it's a little bit easier for minor parties to get elected, like the ones you just heard from, the Jackie Lambie Network and the Greens. And it also becomes a little bit easier for some of the existing independents, but maybe some more as well, to get elected. So what's most likely is that one of the 2 major parties ends up in a minority situation, needing to broker deals with some of those independents or minor parties in able to be able to form that next government going forward.
Adam Langenberg reporting there, and in that story we did hear from Jackie Lambie and also the Tasmanian Greens leader Rosalite Woodruff. And just a reminder, we will have special coverage of the Tasmanian election and the results here on ABC News Radio starting from 7:30pm Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Right now, though, it's time for some sports news with Fraser Fyfe. Fraser, good morning to you. The Geelong, they've continued an upward trend with a win on the road.
The Crows by 19 points at Adelaide Oval. With more, here's ABC Sports' Colin Middlemass.
In his 150th game, Tom Stewart had 28 disposals and a record equalling 10 intercept marks in a standout performance, while Patrick Dangerfield was subbed out with a left hamstring injury in the final minutes. Geelong survived a final term fight back, but the Crows were never able to get back within 2 goals. In a moment sure to draw further criticism, there was a pitch invader in the third quarter that stopped play after he interacted with multiple players. Corbin Middlemass, ABC Sport, Adelaide.
Moving to rugby league, and the Sydney Roosters have thrashed their arch rivals, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, 48 points to 6 at Moore Park. Sam Walker, Joseph Manu and James Tedesco all scored 2 tries for the Roosters. It's their second win of the season, while the Rabbitohs are winless after 3 games. Tedesco has told ABC Sport the Roosters are finding some good form.
We know if we can complete sets, we've got the team to put some points on. So last week we just didn't give ourselves an opportunity. We dropped so much ball on the back foot most of the game. So tonight was a pretty simple game plan for us. Complete, put ourselves in a good position, and we end up scoring some really good points.
In Friday's other match, the Warriors beat the Raiders 18-10 in Christchurch. In Super Rugby Pacific, the ACT Brumbies beat Minor Pacifica 60-21 in Canberra. The top of the ladder Hurricanes defeated the Melbourne Rebels 54-28 in Palmerston North. And in round 2 of the women's competition, the Brumbies had a 24-22 win over the Rebels. Well, the Tasmania Jack Jumpers have levelled their NBL Grand Final series at 1-1 after beating Melbourne United 82 points to 77 in Game 2 in Hobart last night. Jack McVeigh top scored for the Jack Jumpers with 16 points and also had 8 rebounds and 4 assists, while Shea Ely had 20 points for United. McVeigh has told ESPN that the Jack Jumpers are full of confidence.
This series was always going to be a dogfight. The 2 best teams competing it out. I mean, that's Jack Jumper basketball. That's what we do. That's what we've been working towards all year.
Game 3 of the Best of 5 Championship Series is in Melbourne tomorrow. Western Australia is in a strong position heading into Day 3 of the Sheffield Shield cricket final against Tasmania in Perth. Tasmania is 6 for 152 in its first innings, trailing WA by 195 runs. Caleb Jewell made 45 for Tasmania, while Captain Jordan Silk was out for 30. Cameron Gannon has 3 wickets for Western Australia. And another sellout crowd is expected at Melbourne's Albert Park today as practice and qualifying sessions for the Australian Grand Prix continue. Erin Masika-Vetere has the details.
Drivers will get one more chance to make adjustments and adapt to the conditions in the 3rd practice session today before qualifying. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc finished on top in the 2nd practice on Friday, while McLaren's Lando Norris recorded the fastest time in the first run-through. Australian Oscar Piastri has some work to do to catch up to the front runners, as does Daniel Ricciardo, who was outside the top 10 in both sessions. The race for pole position on Sunday's grid begins at 4 p.m. local time.
And that is the latest in sport, Brendan.
Thank you very much, Fraser Fyfe, covering all the sports news today here on ABC News Radio. Right now, let's check your capital city weather for this Saturday, the 23rd of March. Beginning in Brisbane, where it's 19 degrees, a possible shower today and a high of 28. Becoming cloudy in Sydney. It's 16 at the moment, a top of 25 on the way. 8 in Canberra, getting to 23, partly cloudy conditions to start the weekend. A possible shower in Melbourne, where it's 12 right now, 21 the top. 10 to a top of 21 in Hobart with partly cloudy conditions. 15 in Adelaide, mostly sunny, a high of 25. 17 in Perth, sunny with a top of 29, while Darwin's 27, a shower or two and a high of 32. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, it's 6:30am, 6 o'clock in South Australia, 5:30 in Queensland, 4 o'clock in the Northern Territory, 3:30 in the West. Time for a news update.
Good morning, Thanmaya Navada with ABC News. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing preventative chemotherapy treatment. The Princess of Wales broke the news to the world in an emotional video message released by Kensington Palace on Friday evening local time. The cancer was found after she underwent abdominal surgery in January. While it was first thought her condition was benign, follow-up tests discovered the unspecified form of cancer. In her message, Catherine said the diagnosis came as a huge shock. Russian media is reporting multiple casualties after gunmen stormed a concert hall in Moscow. Europe correspondent Steve Kinane reports.
Russian state media is reporting that at least 3 gunmen dressed in camouflage gear opened fire with automatic weapons at the Crocus City Hall in the Moscow region. A fire has engulfed the concert venue, with reports of explosions occurring in the building at the time of the shootings. There are fears that people are still trapped in the building. At least 70 ambulance crews have been sent to the scene, and special units of Russia's National Guard have also been deployed. Moscow's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, called the attacks a great tragedy and said he was sorry for the loved ones of the victims. Steve Kinane, ABC News.
The Queensland Electoral Commission has declared more results a week after the statewide council poll and dual by-elections. Ella Proberts reports.
While some results were clear-cut last Saturday night, others were a close contest. All up, 115 declarations have been made so far for the 77 local government authorities across the state. Postal votes are still trickling in ahead of the March 26 cut-off date. The Ipswich West by-election result has also been declared, confirming the LNP's Darren Zano as the winner. Counting is continuing in Inala. It's likely a full allocation of preferences will be needed to certify the victory of Labor's Margie Nightingale.
Residents living in Victoria's high country are concerned the switch-off of the 3G network will leave them isolated during emergencies. TPG began turning off its 3G network last December, with Telstra following suit in June and Optus in September. Anglo's Rest resident Jeff Aronson had to install a signal booster on his property, giving him 1 bar of 3G. Mr. Aronson says a phone signal was particularly crucial during the Black Summer bushfires, which tore through his region, and when road accidents occur.
There's always the risk of somebody having a heart attack or a stroke or the truck going off the road. And so we want to be able to call up and get an ambulance or get the police or get somebody to go put out a fire. It's really critical.
Renters in Sydney's Blue Mountains say they're being pushed out of their own town by short-term rental accommodation. The local council estimates that 90% of properties available to rent in the area are being used for short-term accommodation like Airbnb and stays. Some residents want the number of days a property can be listed as a short-term rental to be limited to 60, a measure the state government is currently considering. Local Genevieve Murray says the government should also consider a levy on homes that sit empty.
We're tired of being another statistic. We're people, we're communities, we have lived experiences, and housing is critical to our health and well-being. Our youth can't see a future, and we've got elders struggling with housing.
Production costs are reported to be putting a pressure on the sustainability of Adelaide's Fringe Festival. Crowd turnover was measured at about 4.6 million people over the 4 weeks of the 2024 Fringe season, with an average ticket price of $34. The festival's director, Heather Kroll, says the pricing was about the same as last year, but it's become more expensive for artists and venues.
We've got a lot of work to do to try and work out how Fringe can have enough funds for the artists and venues to make sure that they can continue, and box office alone is going to be a struggle when the supply chain's gone up 30 or 40%.
And in sport, Formula One team Williams has announced that Alex Albon will take over the car of his teammate Logan Sargent for the remainder of the Australian Grand Prix weekend, following his crash in the first free practice session on Friday. The car's chassis suffered extensive damage and the team has no replacement. It means they can only run one of two cars for the rest of the weekend. Team principal James Vowles has called the situation unacceptable in modern-day Formula One. And in cricket, Western Australia is in a strong position heading into day 3 of the Sheffield Shield cricket final against Tasmania in Perth. You're up to date with the latest from ABC News.
You're listening to ABC News Radio.
Good morning, I'm Brendan Arrow with you on your All News Network. Making news today, reports of multiple casualties after gunmen storm a concert hall in Moscow. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, diagnosed with cancer. She's set to begin chemotherapy and she's trying to stay positive.
I am well and getting stronger every day by focusing on the things that will help me heal in my mind, body and spirits.
And here at home, dozens gather to pay tribute to a young woman whose body was found in a wheelie bin earlier this month. Moscow is calling the event taking place at a concert hall in the Russian capital a terrorist attack. Reports suggest many have been killed after an attack on the Crocus City Hall on the outskirts of Moscow. The number of those killed is still unclear, but video from the scene shows bodies on the ground and at least 3 people wearing camouflage opening fire. There are also reports of several explosions at the venue, and video obtained by Reuters news agency shows a large blaze and smoke rising from the hall. Konstantin Egart is Deutsche Welle's Russia analyst and knows the concert hall where the attack took place.
It is quite big. It is owned by a Kremlin-friendly oligarch who, as far as I understand, mostly resides in the United States. And of course, it's a famous venue. It's a big venue, and we can also relay the information that is being transmitted now from Moscow, and that it seems like there were 2 explosions in the building. The minimum amount of casualties that was given by the Russian sources, which we cannot verify now, is 10 to 12. And there were reports that there were people trapped inside the building during the fire, which started, but the Russian authorities are now saying they're evacuating those people.
And we're getting reports right now that Moscow's airport is increasing security measures in the wake of this. Talk to me about the reactions that we've seen by Russian authorities as well as by Russian independent media.
Well, the Russian authorities already called it a terrorist attack, and we hear voices from the government sources and, the people in the regime saying that we need to avenge it. As for the independent Russian media, most of the things I've seen is actually reminiscences of people saying that this is very much like 1999 mysterious apartment building explosions in Moscow, which killed dozens of people and to a large extent led to Mr. Putin emerging as a strong leader who is able to win the then war in Chechnya. So there are lots of comparisons to that, and frankly speaking, independent Russian media call it, and I'm just quoting what is being said, they call it a provocation. Now, this is something that needs checked, but this is what I see on the Russian social media. It's really flooded with this type of speculation.
Yeah, there are reports coming in, Konstantin, that there were more than, I think, 6,000 people inside this hall at the time. The capacity of this hall is more than 9,000. But I mean, since you know it well, I mean, evacuating 6,000 people, that doesn't happen quickly or easily, does it?
No, it seems that, again, I'm not there, but it seems, judging by the videos that we've seen, that not everyone arrived for the concert of a popular rock group at the time. So probably there were fewer people, and maybe it wasn't, the tickets were not bought to full capacity, but it will be very difficult. Of course, it's a huge building, and it will be a task to evacuate those people. What we've seen on amateur videos that are now flooding Russian social media is that people started to leave early the moment they heard the first shots. I have to say that there is, I wouldn't say huge, but still there is some memory of the terrorist attacks in Moscow in early 2000s. When you probably remember there was a theater siege. So people do react to that quite quickly, judging by the videos we've seen. But yes, it will be a huge task if there were indeed thousands of people there. And as I said, it's a big one. There's also a big shopping center there.
Yeah, and we're getting reports too that the Chechen leader, Ramzan Kadyrov, has released a statement saying that I strongly condemn such acts of violence, brutality, and recklessness against civilians. What does that tell? How important is it that we heard from him this quickly?
Well, Kadyrov is someone who is one of Mr. Putin's main, to put it mildly, allies.
Yeah.
And of course, always very prompt in issuing any kind of statements that indicate firmness and ruthlessness towards enemies of Russia. His people from Chechnya, I mean, military people from Chechnya, were at war, were taking part and still are taking part in the war in Ukraine. So, of course, he had to react. And, of course, he understands that there are going to be comparisons to the Chechnya war, and he's trying to show that he's heading a different Chechnya now. So I think that's only logical that he makes that.
Deutsche Welle's Konstantin Eggert speaking there with Brent Goff. The other developing story this morning is in London, where Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing preventative chemotherapy treatment. The Princess of Wales broke the news to the world in an emotional video message released by Kensington Palace on Friday evening local time. The ABC's Isabel Higgins joined me earlier from London.
Well, some shocking news that's come from Kensington Palace. Of course, there has been intense speculation online and in the media about Princess Catherine's health. She has been privately recuperating from abdominal surgery. She underwent that surgery in January, and now shocking news from the palace. We've heard that she has been diagnosed with cancer, that she is in the early stages of treatment. We've been told by the princess herself, who delivered this in a video message to the public, in that she said that she believed that this condition was benign when she went in for surgery, but it was in post-operative testing that they found out it was cancerous, and that she's been advised by her medical team to undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy treatment. And there's been a lot of discussion around the timing of this announcement, and this was addressed by the princess in her video. She said part of the reason why they have waited till this time to be out in the open and be talking about it is, number one, it's taken them as a family some time to process this information. Obviously, this is huge news for any individual, for any family, but then that they wanted this to come out around the Easter school holidays so that the Prince and Princess of Wales could be with their 3 young children. That's Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. They are 10, 8 and 5, so very young children. And they talked about how, well, the princess talked about how she wanted to manage this within her home, that she wanted her children to be sure that she was going...
spending's falling, and there are concerns about the health of Australia's biggest trading partner, China. But the RBA governor still thinks we can dodge a recession.
I still firmly believe that we are on the narrow path, and that's what the board is focusing on.
Economists say the RBA has softened its language away from rate hikes.
I'd characterise that as a gradual move to a more neutral bias, more toward potentially cutting rates later this year.
There is a risk that the RBA has to wait until 2025 before they start cutting rates, but our central scenario is November this year.
In line with the Reserve Bank's changing language, there was a subtle shift in market pricing, with the first rate cut now fully priced in by August instead of September, and 2 rate cuts expected by the end of the year.
We do think that households are going through the toughest period right now, and the RBA is aware of this as well.
But relief is on the way. Real wages are starting to rise, and the taxman will be taking a smaller cut from July 1. There was some more welcome news as the energy regulator recommended a small cut to power prices.
I think an easing in energy prices, even if it's just a stabilisation, it's not increasing anymore, I think that's really positive for the inflation outlook, and so I think that's good news.
in more ways than one, if it means the Reserve Bank can cut interest rates sooner.
Any timetable for the start of a rate-cutting cycle could have been pushed back by this week's red-hot jobs numbers. More than 116,000 jobs were created in February, driving the unemployment rate to a near 50-year low of 3.7%. While the jobs market is proving resilient, there's also a growing wave of redundancies as bigger companies slash costs. Filling professional services roles across Australia.
What we're seeing, our client base at the moment is really sort of prioritising strategic hires.
Companies are also taking
those people who are open to 6-month or 12-month type roles are seeing more opportunities.
The unemployment rate unexpectedly fell to 3.7% in February as 116,500 jobs were added to the economy. That's the highest monthly growth since July 2000. The gains were driven by 78,200 full-time positions and 38,300 part-time roles. People also worked more hours, which pushed down the underemployment rate.
Part of the story of today is the increased number of people who had jobs lined up over summer to start in February.
Just like Abby DeLucic, who, after searching for more than 2 months, started a new full-time job 4 weeks ago.
It was really important to me that it was permanent and full-time. I think job security is something that's so valuable these days, especially in the economic times.
Securing her new role wasn't easy.
I think it was certainly more competitive, especially in the marketing space. It's such an emerging industry.
While the latest jobs data shows a surge in full-time roles, most of the growth over the past year has been in part-time positions.
One after another, businesses across the country are going under. Construction, hospitality, retail. These sectors are struggling under a slowing economy, and now the ATO is knocking on their door.
It's always worrying and distressing to be told that you owe the Commonwealth debts, and obviously in these economic times, people are worried about the continuity of their business, and so yes, it can be a factor that tips people over the edge.
The Tax Ombudsman says she's getting more complaints from self-employed people and small business owners who say the ATO is being heavy-handed in its approach. The tactics include taking money directly out of bank accounts, making owners personally liable, reporting debts to credit agencies, and in some cases, winding up companies.
It's pretty serious. I mean, people are already stressed if they're trying to run a business, and their stress levels increase, their anxiety increase.
Total debt owed to the ATO jumped to more than $52 billion at the end of 2023, roughly double the amount owed pre-COVID. 65% of it, or about $34 billion, is owed by small businesses. It's one reason why company insolvencies are tracking 36% higher this financial year compared to the previous one.
So pre-COVID, the ATO was winding up about 40 companies a week in court. And what we've seen is a return to similar numbers where in February, the ATO filed approximately 130 winding up applications, which is really saying these companies shouldn't be around anymore and should be closed down.
Jarvis Archer is helping more businesses restructure, but he predicts insolvencies will soon surpass levels seen just after the global financial crisis.
The ATO has really come out with a vengeance in respect of its collection activities this year. They're really using all of their recovery measures. Their message is very, very clear. Pay your debt, restructure it to an affordable level, or you'll close the business. And if you don't make that decision, then we will force that decision upon you.
Others also fear heavy-handed ATO action could send more firms under.
If the ATO were to pursue this debt aggressively, you'd probably find a lot of small businesses just pretty much hang up their shingles and declare bankruptcy.
The ATO only takes those
what some people may say is the heavy-handed action after it has tried to engage with the taxpayer.
The ATO says that paying tax isn't optional, but that it will support businesses who genuinely need it. But in the wake of the controversial robo-debt scheme, there's concern about the way government agencies are using their power to recover debt. The Tax Ombudsman and the Commonwealth Ombudsman will soon be releasing a joint report calling on agencies like the ATO to rethink their approach.
You can't have a one-size-fits-all. You can't have a tick-the-box approach. You need to actually recognise trauma and stress.
Stress that's likely to increase for Australians in tough economic times.
To the share market, and while the ASX lost value on Friday, it added more than 1% over the 5 trading days. Kyle Rodder from Capital.com says the US Fed gave some certainty to markets this week, and that also boosted the gold price.
Yeah, it did, and it was almost a Goldilocks scenario for gold prices. Effectively, the more dovish than expected Fed and signalling that it still expects to cut interest rates 3 times this year. It projects that it will lower bond yields as well as weaken the US dollar. So both of those factors are typically the main driver of the global gold price, and as a result we saw it above $2,200 US dollars per ounce for the first time in history. So again, it's sort of a Goldilocks scenario, and the Fed really gave it the green light to rise to fresh record highs.
So, of course, the big news was no news, I guess, no action from US, Australia and the Bank of England, all holding rates this week. But they also all had different messages.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall the message was that there's a cutting bias coming from both the central banks for better or worse, and for right or wrong. I think the bias that came through from the Bank of England and the RBA was perhaps a little bit of a surprise that it was towards more of a cut. Whereas in the United States, there were these fears going into the meeting that because of potentially sticky inflation data that suggested as much lately, as well as just very strong economic fundamentals, that we might see a more hawkish Fed than what we got certainly at the January meeting, but definitely compared to the December meeting when we got the last economic projections. So lo and behold, we did get the Fed sort of sticking to its line, this sort of cutting bias. And again, that's what's really boosting equity prices across the globe at the moment, is that there's this kind of concerted attempt really to try and move towards interest rate cuts at some point this year across major central banks.
And we saw that with the Swiss National Bank surprising with a cut. It's become the first major financial sector to do so. How is that pioneering move going to be viewed?
Yeah, well, the first cab off the rank, really. Going into the meeting, there was about a 37% chance that we would see the 25 basis point cut, and lo and behold, that's what we got, which, again, like you said, kind of caught market participants off guard. But it becomes a question of whether this is a trend that is going to unfold across the rest of the globe, or if it's a little bit more idiosyncratic to the Swiss economy, because if you look at the inflation rate in Switzerland, it is at target, in fact it's below target there, and the Swiss National Bank also has a very interesting way of managing monetary policy where it weights the currency fluctuations much higher. So there was a few reasons that were specific to the Swiss National Bank as to why they lowered rates, but certainly markets are pricing in that all other major G10 central banks will be following suit fairly soon. So maybe this is, again, just a simple example of the Swiss moving first in this one.
Kyle, Apple is under fire for stifling competition. How widespread could the ramifications of the lawsuit it faces be?
Well, it's sort of an issue that's disappeared, and disappeared probably mostly by virtue of the pandemic, and then obviously other policy issues in the United States in particular becoming a far greater priority. But there were antitrust issues going into that time period, and now they seem to be re-emerging once again, especially as debate rages about the market share that some of these companies have and how they're potentially abusing it to the detriment of competition as well as consumers. So this is possibly a really big issue, probably one of the biggest issues structurally for some of these tech giants, Apple included, is a far more assertive politics where they do look to break up some of these tech names. I don't think the market see that as a very high probability, because it's probably not in policymakers' interests to really pick these companies apart. But it does show a greater scrutiny on some of these companies and some level of risk at the margins to their profits if there's far stricter regulations imposed to try and crimp their market dominance.
Kyle, Robert, great to have you on. Thanks so much. Banning new Airbnbs, giving cash to landlords to cap rents, and no deposit home loans. These are just some of the policies on offer as Tasmanians head to the polls this weekend. And with elections looming across the nation, the Apple Isle could become the test case as governments grapple to find solutions to the deepening housing crisis. Greg Newsington reports.
Tasmania is a beautiful place to live, but finding a home is becoming increasingly difficult. Student Emily Bresnahan doesn't know where she'll sleep tomorrow night, probably on a friend's couch.
I know where I can stay, but I haven't lined it up that far. Yeah, it's a bit worrying when you say it like that. I don't tell my mum that usually.
The biggest cost of living
Australian state of Victoria withdrew its offer, and it's decided it will be too expensive to host the game, despite being promised more than $100 million by the Commonwealth Games Federation. It's not clear who, if anyone, will now host the next event in 2 years' time. But they're also questioning the point of the games because of their colonial origins. The countries that take part all have links to the former British Empire.
In golf, there's a three-way tie for the lead after 2 rounds at the European Tour's Singapore Classic. A course record 63 from Englishman Andy Sullivan handed him a share of the lead at 9 under, alongside Germany's Freddie Schott and countryman Richard Mansell. David Micheluzzi is the best-placed Australian, sitting tied for 9th at 7 under. Well, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has weighed in on a furore over the English soccer team's new shirts, following Nike's decision to use an altered design of the St George Cross. Nike, which makes the kit for England's national soccer team, unveiled its new design this week, which it said paid homage to the country's 1966 World Cup winning men's team. The shirt's collar features the St George's Cross, which is red on a white background and is England's national flag, but in shades of red, blue and purple. Many fans are calling on Nike to scrap the new design. Mr Sunak says the flag should not have been messed with. And finally, Formula One team Williams has announced that Alex Albon will take over the car of his teammate Logan Sargent for the remainder of the Australian Grand Prix weekend following his crash in the first free practice session on Friday. The car's chassis suffered extensive damage and the team has no replacement. It means they can only run one of the 2 cars for the rest of the weekend. Team principal James Vowles has called the situation unacceptable in modern-day Formula One. And that is the latest in sport. Brendan?
Thank you very much, Fraser. Catch you again in half an hour's time. A quick check of the finance screens. The American market's coming to a close. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 0.6% at 39,526. The S&P 500 is also down, but only slightly. The Nasdaq Composite up almost 0.2% at 16,432. One Australian dollar buying 65.1 US cents. And spot gold 0.8% lower at 2,163 US dollars an ounce. Your capital city weather this Saturday, the 23rd of March. Beginning in Brisbane, it's 19 degrees now. A possible shower about and a high of 28. Sydney 16, getting to 25, becoming cloudy throughout the day. Still just single digits in Canberra, 9 at the moment, partly cloudy with a top of 23 on the way. A possible shower to start the weekend in Melbourne, 21 at the maximum. It's 12 right now. Hobart's 10, getting to 21, partly cloudy. Adelaide 14, mostly sunny with a top of 25. Perth 17, sunny with a predicted maximum of 29 degrees. Darwin's 27, getting to 32 with a shower or two. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, it's 7 o'clock, 6:30 in South Australia, 6 o'clock in Queensland, 5:30 in the Northern Territory, 4 a.m. in the West. It's news time.
Thanmaya Navada with ABC News. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing chemotherapy treatment. Europe correspondent Catherine Diss reports from London.
Princess Catherine broke the news to the world in an emotional video message released by Kensington Palace on Friday evening. The cancer was found after she underwent major abdominal surgery in January. It was first thought to be benign, but follow-up tests confirmed it was cancer. The palace is not revealing what form. She has started undergoing preventative chemotherapy treatment. Confirmation of her diagnosis comes after months of speculation and follows that of King Charles, who's also away from public duties while he undergoes treatment for cancer. Catherine Diss, ABC News, London.
Russia's state media is reporting at least 40 people have been killed during an attack by gunmen on a concert hall in Moscow. Here's Europe correspondent Steve Kinane.
Russian state media is reporting that unidentified gunmen dressed in camouflage gear have opened fire with automatic weapons at Crocus City Hall near Moscow. There are also reports of explosions occurring at the venue, and the building has been engulfed by flames. A helicopter has been called in to help put out the fire. Eyewitnesses have told Russian news agencies that there are many injured and dead. All large-scale sporting, cultural and other public events in Moscow have been cancelled for the weekend following the attack. Steve Kinane, ABC News.
Russia and China have used their veto power at the United Nations Security Council to defeat a US-led resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza. Emily Gromens has more from Washington.
The US, which has vetoed 3 previous resolutions, put forward a resolution supporting a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages. But it was vetoed by Russia and China, who called it ambiguous and not strong enough. Boarding a plane home from Israel, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken expressed disappointment about the resolution.
Which got very strong support, but then was cynically vetoed by Russia and China.
Earlier, he'd met one-on-one with Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu, who, despite US opposition, remains committed to an assault on Rafah, where more than 1 million displaced Gazans are sheltering.
Britain's Defence Secretary has hitched a ride on a $100 million Australian Air Force fighter jet to get between official meetings in Canberra and Adelaide. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
The ABC can reveal that after meeting Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in Canberra on Thursday evening, UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps flew to Adelaide in the back seat of an RAAF Super Hornet. Defence says it was delighted to offer the fast jet experience to one of Australia's key defence partners, demonstrating an important element of this country's military capability. The UK's Royal Air Force does not operate the FA-18 aircraft.
Almost 300,000 Tasmanians will cast their vote in today's state election, and despite polls indicating it's unlikely either major party will win a majority of seats, they're both claiming they can. Adam Langenberg reports.
The Liberal Party has been in power for a decade, with leader Jeremy Rockliff trying to extend that period to 14 years, while Labor's trying to claim victory after 3 straight election losses, 2 of them under leader Rebecca White. They're both backing themselves to form majority government, despite polls predicting that's unlikely, especially for Labor. 405,000 Tasmanians are enrolled to vote at this election, a record number for the state. More than 100,000 of them have already cast their votes at pre-poll centres, on the phone and via post.
Tasmanians can vote at any one of the 255 polling stations across the state between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And Star Entertainment Group has announced its CEO, Robbie Cook, will step down from his role. The company has been at the centre of controversy around its New South Wales and Queensland casinos, including the ongoing Queen's Wharf development in Brisbane's CBD. A statement from Star says Mr Cook's leadership was not conducive to its chances of regaining its casino licence in the state of New South Wales. Mr Cook says while the decision is exceptionally disappointing, a change in leadership is in the company's best interests. You're listening to the latest on ABC News. New figures show the median home value across Australia has hit an all-time high of more than $760,000. Antonio O'Flaherty has the details.
Over the past 12 months, CoreLogic's home value index has risen by 8.9%, adding the equivalent of $63,000 to the national median dwelling value. Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth saw the most widespread increase in value in both houses and units. All 312 houses and 167 units analysed in Brisbane saw values rise over the year. Brisbane saw 86% of properties rise by more than 10%, with the fastest increases around Brisbane South and Logan to Beaudesert. More than 90% of the houses and units in regional Queensland that CoreLogic analysed recorded annual rises in value.
Organisers of a vigil for Chaitanya Madhagani, whose body was found in a wheelie bin southwest of Melbourne earlier this month, have remembered the young mother as a remarkable woman. Ruth Brooke reports.
Last night, dozens gathered at the Saltwater Reserve in Point Cook in honour of Chaitanya Madhagani, who was known to friends and family as Shweta. The community has been in mourning since the news of her death on March 9th, when her body was found in a wheelie bin near Geelong. Victoria's Homicide Squad is continuing investigations into her death. Police say her husband has left the country. Community member Isha Lakshana has remembered Ms. Madhagani as a genuine person.
Every day I'm praying for Shweta. Shweta, don't worry. We all know that your soul is resting in peace.
A condolence book with messages from attendees will be sent to Ms. Madhagani's family overseas.
The Mayor of Sydney's Inner West is urging authorities to speed up work to remediate the asbestos-ridden Rozelle Parklands. The site closed off to the public since the discovery of bonded asbestos in recycled garden mulch in January. Transport for New South Wales says 2 ovals, a shared user path and a footbridge in the parkland will reopen by next Thursday. Inner West Mayor Darcy Byrne says while progress is being made, he'll keep the pressure on the contractor who sourced the mulch to clean it up faster.
The fact that the EPA had to grant them an extension is simply not good enough, but it's good that the park will now be reopened to the public in stages, and we're going to keep the pressure on to make it happen faster.
Overseas protests have taken place in New Delhi over the arrest of one of India's most consequential politicians, which opposition parties say is part of a larger crackdown on dissent by Narendra Modi's party ahead of an election. South Asia correspondent Avani Dias reports from New Delhi.
Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal is accused of accepting $1 billion rupees in bribes from liquor contractors in return for a licensing policy for alcohol in the state. Mr Kejriwal's party and others in opposition say Prime Minister Narendra Modi is using the law to raid his opponents to get an advantage in the election in April. Mr Modi's party, the BJP, denies targeting the opposition, saying law enforcement agencies act independently. Avani Dias, ABC News, Delhi.
With sport, here's Fraser Fife.
Geelong has started its AFL season with 2 wins in a row after a 19-point victory over the Crows at Adelaide Oval. Geelong's Tom Stewart had 28 disposals in his 150th match, while Matt Crouch had 38 disposals for the Crows. Cats forward Tom Hawkins has told ABC Sport that while the team is happy with the start to the season, there's still plenty of room for improvements.
That's not the be-all and end-all, but it gives them opportunity to enjoy the season.
Tasmania Jack Jumpers have levelled their NBL Grand Final Series 1-1 after beating Melbourne United 82 points to 77 in Game 2 in Hobart. Jack McVeigh top scored for the Jack Jumpers with 16 points, while Shea Illy had 20 for United. Game 3 of the best-of-5 series is in Melbourne on Sunday. And Western Australia is in a strong position heading into Day 3 of the Sheffield Shield cricket final against Tasmania in Perth. Tasmania is 6 for 152 in its first innings, trailing WA by 195 runs.
And to finance on Wall Street, the S&P 500 is down slightly to 5,239. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 250 points to 39,530, and the Nasdaq is slightly higher at 16,438. Oil is down, with Brent crude trading at $85.4 a barrel. Gold is also down to $2,164 an ounce. And the Australian dollar is lower, trading at 65.1 US cents. You're up to date with the very latest from ABC News. For more news at any time, you can download the ABC Listen app.
You're listening to ABC News Radio.
It's Saturday the 23rd of March. I'm Brendan Arrow. Making news today, reports of multiple casualties after a gunman storms a concert hall in Moscow. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, calls for privacy after being diagnosed with cancer. She's set to undergo chemotherapy treatment.
We hope that you'll understand that as a family, we now need some time, space and privacy while I complete my treatment.
And in the next half an hour, we'll also have the latest finance news with Colin Jasinski. It's now being reported at least 40 people have been killed and over 100 others wounded after gunmen attacked a packed concert venue on the outskirts of Moscow. Dramatic video shows panicked concert goers taking cover as shots and explosions ring out. A large fire has engulfed the roof of the complex and Russian special forces have been deployed to the scene. The BBC's Graham Satchell is following events and says officials in Moscow, including former President Dmitry Medvedev, are beginning to point the finger at Ukraine.
If it is established that these are terrorists of the Kiev region, i.e. from Ukraine, all of them must be found and ruthlessly destroyed as terrorists. So there does seem to be a narrative forming, potentially, if I can put it that way, that Moscow seems to be pointing the finger of blame. Ukrainian authorities themselves have spoken and said, not us, it had nothing to do with us. Russia, of course, has seen attack after attack after attack over the years from Chechen rebels, from Islamic State rebels, from various groups within the Russian Federation who are not happy with the Moscow regime. But this is still an ongoing situation. Reports started out being very sketchy, reports of gunfire being heard and the building on fire. As the evening's gone on, eyewitnesses tell us that between 3 and 5 men entered this concert hall in the northwest of Moscow, dressed in camouflage gear. You've seen the footage of them now inside the building, opening fire on people who were getting ready to see the rock band, the Russian rock band, Picnic. The scene's quite terrifying inside that concert hall. People trying to flee, people escaping to the basement and to the roof. We also understand that a number of incendiary devices were let off by these gunmen, and the building was, for a period of time, and may still be on fire. It's a little unclear exactly what's happening now in Moscow, whether this situation is still ongoing. We know that Russian special forces have been deployed and are in the area, but as far as we can see, this is a terrible terrorist attack that is still ongoing. The latest casualty figures that we have are that 40 people are now have been killed. That's not a confirmed number, but that's the latest figure that we have from the TASS news agency in Russia, and more than 100 people are injured. So a very serious event still unfolding tonight in Moscow.
The geography here, that is not in the heart of Moscow, just on the outside edge of Moscow, a key central venue though. Graham, talk us through some of the reaction we've been monitoring, not just from Russia, but from around the world.
Yes, so Washington has been commenting on this and has described the events in Moscow as terrible. The White House spokesman saying the pictures are just horrible to watch. Interestingly, the White House is also saying that as far as they're concerned, that there is no Ukrainian involvement in this attack. Russia has already responded to that, saying if the White House has evidence of no Ukrainian involvement, they need to share that intelligence. And of course,
the focus of attention will very quickly move, well, in a number of directions, but one, who are these gunmen and what is their motive? We do not know that yet. Interestingly, again, the American embassy in Moscow did put out a warning in the first week of March to US citizens to warn them to avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours. That was on March the 7th, so a couple of weeks ago now. So it may well be that there has been some intelligence floating around about some sort of imminent attack. As you may have heard from a previous guest, the social media in Russia is very much asking this question: how could this have happened in the capital city in Moscow, particularly at a time when the country is at war and security is meant to be so tight? The mayor of Moscow has cancelled all public events this weekend. Security has been stepped up at airports and railway stations. So Moscow has almost gone into a sort of lockdown mode at the moment. But certainly the White House has reacted, saying this is a terrible event.
Obviously, we've all seen the reports in the video coming out of Moscow. This violent shooting at looks like a shopping mall. Can't speak much to the details of it. I mean, this was all just breaking before I came on out here, so we're trying to get more information, but really would refer to Russian authorities to speak to it. The images are just horrible and just hard to watch, and our thoughts obviously are going to be with the victims of this terrible, terrible shooting attack.
That's US National Security Council spokesman John Kirby ending that report from the BBC's Graham Satchell. The Princess of Wales says she's in the early stages of cancer treatment. In a video message released in the last couple of hours, she says the news came as a huge shock and her family had experienced an incredibly tough couple of months. The 42-year-old says it's taken time to explain everything to her 3 children and to reassure them she's going to be okay. From London, CNN's Max Foster reports.
It's interesting, you watch that video, this is a big thing for, anyone to do, but Kate isn't always comfortable in the cameras doing things like that, and that was a big step for her and very powerful, and she would have made that decision. She would have had to sign off on it. I want to do it in this way. I want to do it on my own. I don't need Prince William in this. I need to own this. So I think that would have taken a lot of building up to, another explanation for why we haven't seen much of her recently. But we've just heard from Buckingham Palace, a spokesman just sent me a note from the King. So His Majesty is so proud of Catherine for her courage in speaking as she did. Following her time in hospital together, His Majesty has remained in the closest contact with his beloved daughter-in-law throughout the past weeks. Both their Majesties will continue to offer their love and support to the whole family through this difficult time. I think it was quite a unique experience, wasn't it, for Kate and Charles to be in hospital together and having pretty similar experiences, going in for one procedure and coming out with a completely different diagnosis. But he's very much looking at that video she put out today and really paying tribute to her and the way she speaks to the children, and clearly he feels that she's getting all of her priorities right there.
There has been so much, obviously, consternation and conspiracy theories about Catherine over the last 2 weeks or more. It's in a moment like this when you really see this family that so many people see from afar and see on balconies and riding around in carriages at big celebrations. You see them very much as human. She is a young woman sitting on this bench telling the world this extremely personal diagnosis.
I think this is part of the shock, isn't it? Because you do realise they are vulnerable like everyone else, but they're projected as this brand which is sort of invincible in a way. It's been around for 1,000 years, and we're so used to the Queen being around for so long. And shortly after the King takes the throne, we found out he's got cancer. And the thing about Kate is she's this vision of vibrancy. She's very sporty, she's very energetic, she's very dutiful. She's a fantastic mum from everything that I've seen, really hands-on. And I think it's a shock when we heard the Queen was ill, that was a shock, even though she was so old. But it's just this vulnerability, someone that's in your life. You don't know them personally, but they've been part of your life for so long, and they might not be there. And then you kind of figure out, what if Charles and Kate weren't there? It's that sort of processing. So I think it is very personal for a lot of people. And as Kate spoke to in her video, I think about other people who suffer from cancer. This is something I really saw when the Queen died, that people connected with that moment because through people who've died in their own lives. And I think people now will be thinking of people who've suffered from cancer in their own lives and, looking at Kate as someone that's vulnerable to that, someone you wouldn't expect to be vulnerable to any sort of illness. It's just this vision of vibrancy. So less said, as far as I'm concerned, about the distasteful, upsetting conspiracy theories that boiled up in recent times. They now have the reason for why we didn't see them. Interesting that pretty much the only thing I didn't see online in recent weeks was speculation that she could have cancer. But I think everyone needs to step back a bit and really think about not just what they're putting online, what they're consuming online, and just sticking to the facts. On CNN, we've had lots of discussions about this. We want people to get the facts, and it's an incredibly hard story to tell because there have been so few facts. But now we know why we weren't being given information. I think it's understandable that you'd want to protect your kids, frankly.
CNN's Max Foster reporting from London. Time now to talk finance news, see how the European and American markets finished the week. Colin Shazinski is the Chief Market Strategist with SIA Wealth Management, and he joins us now from North America. Colin, thanks very much for your time. How have the markets closed?
We had a mixed finish to trading to the week, although overall it ended up being a positive week. For world markets, we have things, the Dow and the S&P 500 and other markets hitting new all-time highs, but today it was a little soft. The Dow lost 305 points, or 0.7%, to close at 39,475. The S&P 500 lost 7 points to close at 5,234. The Nasdaq eked out a small gain of 26 points to close at 16,428. Over in Europe, it was a little bit more positive. The DAX gained 26 points, or 0.1%, to close at 18,205. The FTSE gained 48 points, or 0.6%, to close at 7,930. Crude oil lost 23 cents a barrel to close at $80.84. Gold lost $18.15 a pound, or 50 cents a pound, to close at $2,166 an ounce. Gold also had hit a new all-time high earlier in the week.
There's also been some very different reactions to big names' earnings reports. What more can you tell us?
Sure, we're mostly in between earnings seasons right now, but there were a few names that put out results over the last day or so, and the reaction was quite different. FedEx, the courier company, gained 7.3% today on the back of a positive earnings report. On the other hand, two clothing companies had some really negative reactions to signs that their sales were slowing and weaker guidance. The first was Nike, which lost 6.9% today, and Lululemon, which dropped 15.8% today. And we've seen this in recent weeks that retailers, and particularly clothing-related companies, haven't been doing so well.
And just finally, the social media company Reddit had its IPO this week. How's it gone on the first 2 days of trading?
It was mixed, but overall pretty good. The Reddit priced its IPO at $34 a share when it came out, and in the first day its debut of trading on Thursday, it shot up to $50. So it had a huge run on a pop on its opening day, and that's a sign that still of investor confidence and investor appetite in taking on new stocks. Today, however, it did have more of a correction. It dropped 8.8% and slumped back to about $46. So down from its high of Thursday, but still much higher than its initial public offering price.
Colin Shazinski, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Colin Shazinski, the Chief Market Strategist with SIA Wealth Management.
Get the latest news when you want it. The ABC Listen app has all our top stories. Simply click the icon that says Latest News. You can play them individually.
He wants to see a draft plan as soon as possible.
Skip stories.
Border security.
Or just let them roll.
The mayor says there is cause for optimism. First of a suspected litany of... A further $18 billion.
Take the news wherever you go.
Hold the lift.
With the ABC Listen app. Download it for free today.
Great to have your company here on your All News Network. Let's get the very latest sports news. Good morning, Fraser Fyfe.
Good morning, Brendan. Well, the Adelaide Crows have started their AFL season with 2 straight losses after going down to Geelong by 19 points at Adelaide Oval. The Cats won 14 goals 12-96 to the Crows 11-77. Matt Crouch had 38 disposals for the Crows, while Geelong's Tom Stewart finished with 28 disposals in his 150th match. Adelaide defender Jordan Butts has told ABC Sport that the team is confident a win is just around the corner.
It's obviously a very disappointing start. Yeah, not the way we wanted to start the season. But yeah, thankfully it's just a start and it's a long season, so we're looking forward to crack in for the rest of the season, so we're staying positive.
In the NRL, the Sydney Roosters have thrashed arch-rival South Sydney 48 points to 6 at the Sydney Football Stadium. Andrew Moore reports.
It was a great celebration for Sydney Roosters front rower Jared Waerea-Hargreaves in his 300th NRL game, becoming just the 50th player in the game's history to achieve that milestone. The Roosters were quickly away with a try to Dominic Young in just the 4th minute, and by half-time it opened up an 18-0 lead. In all, they ran in 8 tries to 1 with doubles to Walker, James Tedesco and Joey Manu. The bad news, Sam Walker suffered a Category 1 HIA in the second half, not to return, and he'll miss the round 4 game against the Penrith Panthers, while South Sydney have now lost their first 3 games of the season after missing the finals in 2023.
In Super Rugby Pacific, the ACT Brumbies have thrashed Moana Pacifica 60-21 in Canberra. The top-of-the-ladder Hurricanes defeated the Melbourne Rebels 54-28 in Palmerston North. And in round 2 of the women's competition, the Brumbies had a 24-22 win over the Rebels. The Tasmania Jack Jumpers have levelled their NBL Grand Final series at 1-1 after beating Melbourne United 82 points to 77 in Game 2 in Hobart last night. Jack McVeigh top scored for the Jack Jumpers with 16 points and also had 8 rebounds and 4 assists, while Shea Illy had 20 points for United. McVeigh has told ESPN that the Jack Jumpers are full of confidence.
This series is always going to be a dogfight. The 2 best teams competing it out. I mean, that's Jack Jumper basketball. That's what we do. That's what we've been working towards all year.
Game 3 of the best-of-5 championship series is in Melbourne tomorrow. Western Australia is in a strong position heading into Day 3 of the Sheffield Shield cricket final against Tasmania in Perth. Tasmania is 6 for 152 in its first innings, trailing WA by 195 runs. Caleb Jewell made 45 for Tasmania, while captain Jordan Silk was out for 30. Cameron Gannon has 3 wickets for WA. Meanwhile, Malaysia's government has rejected an offer to host the 2026 Commonwealth Games. The Sports Ministry says it's due to uncertainty over the economic impact and insufficient funding offered to take on the event. Malaysia was asked to step in after Victoria withdrew as hosts, citing ballooning costs. The decision placed the future of the event in doubt and raises questions about the benefits and continued relevance of the Games. Ducati's Enea Bastianini has topped the second practice session of MotoGP's Portuguese Grand Prix. Bastianini set the best pace for the factory team, leading the way by just over a tenth of a second over Australian Jack Miller for KTM. 8-time world champion Marc Marquez completed the top 3 despite suffering his first race weekend crash of the year. And finally, another sellout crowd is expected at Melbourne's Albert Park today as practice and qualifying sessions for the Australian Grand Prix continue. Erin Masikavetere has the details.
Drivers will get one more chance to make adjustments and adapt to the conditions in the 3rd practice session today before qualifying. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc finished on top in the 2nd practice on Friday, while McLaren's Lando Norris recorded the fastest time in the first run-through. Australian Oscar Piastri has some work to do to catch up to the front runners, as does Daniel Ricciardo, who was outside the top 10 in both sessions. The race for pole position on Sunday's grid begins at 4 p.m. local time.
And that is the latest in sport. Brendan?
Thank you very much, Fraser Fyfe, covering all the sports news today here on ABC News Radio. A quick look at the Australian dollar. It's currently buying 65.1 US cents, 51.6 Great British pence, 60.2 Euro cents, 98.5 Japanese yen, and $1.08 New Zealand. It is Saturday the 23rd of March. Let's have a look at what's happening in your capital cities weather-wise. Brisbane's 19 degrees, a possible shower about, a top of 28 on the way. Becoming cloudy in Sydney at 16 already, a maximum of 25 expected. It's dropped back down to 8 degrees in Canberra, partly cloudy with a high of 23 on the way. A possible shower, top of 21 for Melbourne to start the weekend. It's 12 right now. 11 degrees in Hobart, Saturday, a partly cloudy day with a top of 21. 14 in Adelaide, a maximum of 25 degrees predicted with mostly sunny conditions. Sunny in Perth, 16 to a high of 29. Darwin's already 27, getting to 32 with a shower or two. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, it's 7:30am, 7 o'clock in South Australia, 6:30 in Queensland. It's 6am in the Northern Territory and 4:30am in the West. Good morning, I'm Brendan Arrow. It's time now for the latest news headlines with Maya Navadar.
Thanks, Brendan. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has assured the British public she's on the road to recovery after revealing she's been diagnosed with cancer and undergoing preventative chemotherapy treatment. The cancer was found after she underwent abdominal surgery in January when it was first thought her condition was benign. However, follow-up tests discovered the unspecified form of cancer. In a video message, Catherine has said while the diagnosis came as a huge shock, she is much better now thanks to the support of her family and the British public. Russian media is reporting at least 40 people have been killed in a shooting in the capital, Moscow. At least 3 gunmen dressed in camouflage gear reportedly opened fire with automatic weapons at the Crocus City Hall. A fire has engulfed the concert venue with reports of explosions occurring inside the building at the time of the shootings. Tasmania's Electoral Commission predicts it could take up to 3 weeks before the result of today's state election is officially declared. More than a quarter of the 405,000 enrolled Tasmanian voters have already cast their votes at early voting centres by phone or post. Polls are projecting a clear majority will not be declared tonight, with both major parties projected to fall short of a majority. The Victorian government has recognised the work of 11 Aboriginal leaders in a ceremony celebrating their achievements. Last night, the Minister for Treaty and First Peoples, Natalie Hutchins, inducted them into the Victorian Aboriginal Honour Roll at Melbourne's Arts Centre. They were celebrated for their contributions to sport, justice, land rights, health and education. And SA Health has issued a warning for people to avoid contact with water from the River Murray between Wellington and Goolwa due to a blue-green algae bloom. Elevated levels of blue-green algae have also been found in Lake Alexandrina. SA Health says pets should also be kept out of the water as exposure to the algae will also make them unwell. Brendan, I'll be back with more news in just under half an hour.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.
You're listening to ABC News Radio.
Making news today, gunmen have stormed a concert hall in Moscow. There are reports dozens of people have been killed. Also, the Princess of Wales diagnosed with cancer and is set to undergo chemotherapy treatment.
My work has always brought me a deep sense of joy, and I look forward to being back when I'm able. But for now, I must focus on making a full recovery.
And here at home, a new Powerhouse Museum storehouse in Sydney's northwest. Well, it's open to the public today. Let's begin with this developing news in Russia. At least 40 people have been killed and over 100 others wounded after gunmen attacked a packed concert venue on the outskirts of Moscow. Dramatic video shows panicked concertgoers taking cover as shots and explosions ring out. A large fire engulfed the roof of the complex and Russian special forces have been deployed to the scene. Moscow has blamed Ukraine, but authorities in Kyiv have denied any involvement. Dr. Marina Miron is a researcher at the War Studies Department at the Centre for Military Ethics at King's College London.
Well, I was shocked at first, obviously, because nobody was expecting it. We have seen several attacks on the likes of oil refineries, So mostly those attacks didn't include any civilian targets, and this by definition is an act of terrorism, strictly speaking. And what it reminded me of, you said the Manchester arena, but I'm thinking back to early 2000, and I'm thinking of Nordost and what happened there with the Chechens holding people hostage also in the theater. So this is what I'm thinking. It has certain parallels to that particular terrorist attack.
And if it's clearly, we should underline that it is clearly very early stages here. We do not know who is behind it and what exactly has happened here. But what does it speak to in your mind about the state of security in Russia as a whole right now?
Well, it is an interesting question which we should consider from multiple angles. The first one is the state of security, and we know that Moscow has been reinforcing security all across Russia and stepping up the levels of security, specifically because of those drone attacks I mentioned earlier. We remember last year, before the May Victory Day celebrations, there were drone attacks on the Kremlin. And so I think that whoever is behind this has been planning it for a long time and has had the resources to orchestrate this terrorist attack. It doesn't seem to me that just a loosely connected group of people would be able to do this, knowing that in Moscow every inch is basically outfitted with CCTVs, so everything is monitored. So I don't think that it's necessarily the issue with a lack of security, but the issue that those who were planning it were very, very careful and meticulous in order to be able to orchestrate something like that despite the existing security.
Well, just on exactly your point there, I just want to read something to you just to see what you make of it. It's from Gordon Carrera, our security correspondent here, saying clearly it's too early to know who was responsible for this attack. But it is notable that 2 weeks ago, the US issued an unusual warning to its citizens in Russia. It was monitoring reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow, to include concerts. The message said US citizens should avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours. It was a couple of weeks ago, I should stress, not this weekend. But what do you make of that warning from the US Embassy?
Well, it is interesting because the US intelligence would probably have some sort of information on what is happening and what groups are operating inside Russia, and the possible connection of those groups to intelligence services of other countries. And it is not a secret that the CIA has been critical of the Ukrainian SBU in terms of their operations on Russian territory. Therefore, we have to also look at who might have been benefiting from an attack like this, because it is very symbolic. It is a message. So because there exists a connection between the CIA and the Ukrainian SBU, there is also intelligence sharing between the two agencies, essentially. And the CIA was actually training and remaking a part of Ukrainian intelligence apparatus. There might have been some sort of indication that something like that could happen. Now, we don't have any proof. We're just theorizing here who could have the capabilities to do that and who would be interested in this sort of attack. And of course, we have to understand that Russia has other enemies. It's not just Ukraine, but who would have had the capabilities and the resources to orchestrate an operation like that. And there is also a possibility of several groups being involved and being utilized as a proxy. So it can get very, very complex when we're trying to analyze this.
Dr. Marina Maron from King's College London. In another development, Russia has hit Ukraine's power infrastructure in their sustained drone and missile attack, leaving around 1 million people without power and at least 5 dead. And that's led President Volodymyr Zelensky to again call for Western countries to provide more air defences. Russia now says it's in a state of war with Ukraine. Until recently, the Kremlin has only used the term special military operation. Local officials in Kharkiv say 700,000 households are without power after supply to the Zaporizhia nuclear plant was partially cut up. More from the BBC.
Zaporizhia was heavily damaged, and so far we know that the main target there was the biggest hydropower station in Ukraine, Dnipro hydropower station. That's the name of this plant. And at least one substation of this big plant was so heavily damaged that the Ukrainian officials said they can't predict, they can't even now understand how much time it might take to repair and to restore the electricity supply. So this region of Ukraine is now on the verge of the blackout. Also, unfortunately, there were casualties, and we know, for example, that the trolley bus that was on its way to pick up passengers, and it was next to this hydropower station. It was smashed, it was set on fire by the Russian missile, and there was big fear that there were passengers there, but there were no passengers on board at that moment. There was a driver and he was killed. And also the father and his daughter were killed in Zaporizhia by these Russian missile strikes. Also, what is important to understand that it was the largest air attack on the Ukrainian power grid since the war began, and almost every single big Ukrainian power plant was targeted by a big number of Russian missiles and explosive drones at the same time. That made the work of Ukrainian air defense especially difficult. Such power plants like the one that I mentioned was targeted by 6-8 missiles at the same time. So it's almost impossible to intercept all of them.
The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has used the word war for the first time about what's happening in Ukraine. Any reflections on that?
From the Ukrainian perspective, there is very little new in that statement. But again, what is maybe the most important part of this message for the Ukrainian audience is that he also said that Russia can't let Ukraine exist as a state, because bordering Russia, according to him, Ukraine wants to get back the Crimea and those territories that were occupied already by Russia. So that's what is really important for Ukrainians in that message. But on the other hand, I think also there is a very strong message here for the West that it should stop help Ukraine, because otherwise there might be an escalation.
That's the BBC's Zana Bezpiachuk. Israel's UN ambassador has declared there will be no ceasefire in Gaza until Hamas is wiped out. His comments came after the UN Security Council failed to pass a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza as part of a hostage deal with Israel, after Russia and China voted against the measure proposed by the United States. The resolution called for an immediate and sustained ceasefire, lasting roughly 6 weeks, that would protect civilians and allow delivery of much-needed humanitarian assistance. While the talking goes on, the death toll in Gaza continues to rise. More than 13,000 children have been killed since Israel's bombardment began 5 months ago, with UNICEF, that's the United Nations Children's Agency, describing the death toll as staggering. The overall death toll in the Hamas-run territory now stands at almost 32,000. The BBC's Ula Giran has been looking at the story of one girl, Alma, who's lost her entire family.
Well, Alma is a 12-year-old girl who was living with her family in an area of downtown Gaza City. After the war began, she told us they moved several times. Her parents were desperately trying to keep the family safe, but she said in each location they went to, the first, the second, and then the third, there was bombing in the area, and on the third occasion, the bomb actually landed on the 5-story building in which Alma was sheltering, not just with her family, but she says with about 140 other refugees. Now, she is a remarkably strong, bright, intelligent girl, and we had wanted to tell the story of an orphan in Gaza, but we wanted to find a child who was well enough, who was old enough, and who was ready to tell that story. And we were put in touch with Alma. Of course, we got permission from her aunt and uncle, who are taking care of her now. She's now living with them and their children in a tent in Rafah. But Alma was able to give us a very detailed account of the events of the night and morning in which she was trapped underneath the rubble, and that was the morning of December 2nd. And we were able to obtain the rescue video that lets us hear exactly what happened when rescuers heard her voice calling out. A shout from under the rubble. I'm Alma. Can you see my light? Asks Mahmoud, the rescue worker. I swear I'll get to you. Alma asks for her sister and brothers. Bravo, Alma, he says, as she emerges after 3 hours buried alive. Where are your brothers and sister, he asks. They're over here, she says, and my mum is over there.
I am 12 years old and the only survivor of my family. The first place we fled to was bombed, and the second. And in the third place, the bomb hit us. They were all killed. We were happy together as a family, though we were scared. We used to hug each other tightly out of fear. I hoped my brother Tarazan would still be alive. I was calling out to him. I found him in an unimaginable state, his head severed.
What a memory for a child to carry.
I wish for death after seeing my brother like that. He was only 18 months old. What has he done in this war?
We don't know how many Almas there are in Gaza, and we may never know. There are many in Gaza who never get a chance to tell their story. There are countless numbers who are still buried beneath the rubble, and that includes Alma's family. Almost 4 months on, the only body that was recovered was the body of her baby brother Tarazan, so she is still not even able to give her family a proper burial. Now, it's very hard to try and put figures on all of this, but we did get one estimate from a respected independent Palestinian human rights group that has field workers on the ground in Gaza. And they told us that according to their most recent estimate, which was at the end of February, there are about 20,000 children who have been orphaned by the war in Gaza. But they also emphasised that the real figure could be much higher because of the difficulty and the danger of trying to gather information in Gaza. She is very much trapped in harm's way, and she's acutely aware of that. She's very conscious of the danger. As she said during her interview with the BBC, that when she was rescued from the rubble in Gaza City, she hoped that she was going to be taken to a safe place, but she described a harrowing journey on the road to Rafah, seeing tanks, seeing soldiers, seeing snipers. She said they kept pointing in her direction every time she and the other people moved. She said she was almost on the brink of dying from fear. Now she's in Rafah, there's no way out. There are about 1.4 million Palestinians who are trapped there. This is the last place that Palestinians have been able to run to. They have come all the way from the north and the centre of Gaza, and now they are in Rafah, right up against the border with Egypt. The United States and others are urging Israel out loud not to carry out a ground assault on the area. Israel is saying it intends to do so. It repeated that as recently as yesterday. It claims it will be able to do this in a manner where civilians will be evacuated somehow to some place that will be safe, and humanitarian aid will be provided. But I think it's very hard, certainly for aid agencies, to see how that could possibly be done and how another huge loss of life can be avoided.
Are members of the Israeli public hearing stories like Alma's?
No, the material they tend to see from Gaza is of Israeli troops in action, showing material that is found that relates to Hamas. One or two Israelis have said to me that they just do not see the other side of the story. It is simply not broadcast. It's not put before their eyes. And I think there is also a sense that even for us, try as we might, we're covering a fraction of what's going on in Gaza. I feel that when the day comes that we are able to enter Gaza and really investigate on the ground and really try and piece together what has gone on, countless stories will emerge like Alma's.
The BBC's Ula Gearan reporting there. Let's come back home now. And from koalas to quokkas and even the Tassie devil and platypuses, Australia is home to unique wildlife found nowhere else in the world. But it turns out we're also having extinction on the planet, with species like the eastern quoll having disappeared from the mainland. This year, Earth Hour organisers are hoping individuals at home can also join in to raise awareness of the situation. Rachel Lance is the head of individual giving at the WWF.
So climate change is one of the biggest threats facing our planet, along with biodiversity loss. And here in Australia, we know that climate change has fueled devastating bushfires and floods, which obviously has an impact on our wildlife and species. But alongside that, Australia is one of the largest deforestation hotspots in the world. We're cutting down trees which provide home to millions of species in our country, and so we're literally stripping away the landscape that these species live in.
So how does an event like Earth Hour help?
So Earth Hour started back in 2007 as a bit of an awareness raising piece to really share the impact of climate change and the importance of biodiversity loss. This year we've done things a little bit differently and started a fundraising challenge alongside Earth Hour. So we're actually, alongside raising awareness, we're also raising critical funds for projects to regenerate nature.
We've spoken a lot on News Radio about the cost of living crisis hitting people right around the country at the moment. Do you think people still have the time and the funds to support charity groups like yours?
We know it's a really difficult time for everyone living in Australia, and there are many causes and also many challenges in meeting the rising costs of bills. But we're really hoping that people still stand in solidarity with Earth Hour and take that signature switch-off move. We don't have to have fundraising as a part of this. We know that it's not possible for everyone. So we are hoping that people can take that opportunity to switch off and still, deliver that symbolic message around Earth Hour and the critical impact that our planet's in.
So what should people do tonight to be a part of Earth Hour?
So we'd love for as many of us as possible to switch off at 8:30 tonight. They can do candlelight dinners or just turn off all of their electricity. You could head out to some of our iconic areas, that the Sydney Opera House is switching off. Just take that time to observe and reflect and also share. If you are switching off tonight, we'd love to see it on your social medias and really share that awareness of why it's important to switch off and really, promote that message around the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss.
Rachel Lance, head of individual giving at the World Wildlife Fund. The new Powerhouse Museum in northwest Sydney is officially opening its doors to the public today. The $44 million facility at Castle Hill is the new home of more than 500,000 objects and includes one of the largest photographic cycloramas in the southern hemisphere. The project is part of the $1.2 billion taxpayer-funded renewal of the Powerhouse, including a new site in Parramatta and upgrades to the museum in the CBD. Powerhouse Chief Executive Lisa Havler says she thinks attendees will find it's worth the 5-year wait.
So we're so excited today to be launching our beautiful new Powerhouse Castle Hill building, which will hold the Powerhouse collection, but also provide space for audiences to engage with the collection in new ways, exhibitions, learning programs, research. Also, it'll be the first time that the Powerhouse collection team are co-located with the collection all on one site, which is super exciting. The project has been in the planning and delivery phase over the last 5 years, and it's so exciting to see it now open to the public for the benefit of the communities of Castle Hill, but the communities of Sydney and New South Wales more broadly.
And how does this coincide as well with the closure of the powerhouse in Sydney?
So we closed the powerhouse at the beginning of February to undertake revitalisation works. And so while the powerhouse is closed in Ultimo over the next 3 years, we'll be opening our new museum in Parramatta, and we'll continue to deliver expanded programs in Castle Hill.
And what can people see that's going to be different at this new facility in Castle Hill?
Audiences will be able to experience the Powerhouse collection in completely new ways. So it's open storage, so you'll be able to experience over the weekend the collection in storage, but you'll be able to see things, trains, planes, automobiles, but also you'll be able to see very unique objects from the Powerhouse collection that have never been seen publicly before. Powerhouse Castle Hill is an international standard storage facility. It has really very specialist conservation facilities, as well as a new digitisation photographic studio. So not only will it be a place where audiences can access the collection, it'll also be a place where our collection staff and team can work with the collection. We can welcome researchers from across Australia and around the world to work with the collection as well. So the project itself is about access to the collection, but also developing a deeper understanding of what the collection is and the knowledge it holds.
Powerhouse Chief Executive Lisa Havler there. You are listening to ABC News Radio. It's time for some sports news with Fraser Fyfe. And Fraser, impressive performance from the Geelong Cats last night. It's led to the Adelaide Crows with some questions to answer.
It has indeed. They've lost their opening 2 games of the season. They went down to Geelong by 19 points at Adelaide Oval. With more, here's ABC Sports' Corbin Middlemass.
In his 150th game, Tom Stewart had 28 disposals and a record equalling 10 intercept marks in a standout performance, while Patrick Dangerfield was subbed out with a left hamstring injury in the final minutes. Geelong survived a final term fight back, but the Crows were never able to get back within 2 goals. In a moment sure to draw further criticism, there was a pitch invader in the third quarter that stopped play after he interacted with multiple players. Corbin Middlemass, ABC Sport, Adelaide.
In rugby league, the Sydney Roosters have defeated their arch rivals, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, 48 points to 6 at Moore Park. Sam Walker, Joseph Manu and James Tedesco all scored 2 tries for the Roosters. It's their second win of the season, while the Rabbitohs are winless after 3 games. Tedesco has told ABC Sport the Roosters are finding some good form.
We know if we can complete sets, we've got the team to put some points on. So last week we just didn't give ourselves an opportunity. We dropped so much ball on the back foot most of the game. So tonight was a pretty simple game plan for us. Complete, put ourselves in a good position, and we end up scoring some really good points.
In Friday's other match, the Warriors beat the Raiders 18-10 in Christchurch. In basketball, Tasmania coach Scott Roth has praised his side's gutsy effort in their 5-point win at home over Melbourne United in the NBL's Championship Series. The Jack Jumpers fought back from a 15-point deficit to claim a memorable 82-77 win and level the 5-game series at a game apiece. Jack McVeigh starred for the home side with 16 points, 8 rebounds and 4 assists. Roth says the entire team contributed.
Crawford started us off really well in the beginning of the game and got us going and got the crowd going, and then everyone else just seemed to chip in at the right time. But, they're a hell of a team. It's just one game, but, a slugfest at the end of the day, and nothing that we didn't expect. And I just thought it was a gutsy performance by our guys.
Malaysia has rejected an offer to host the 2026 Commonwealth Games after Victoria withdrew as host, citing ballooning costs. The Malaysian government says its decision is due to insufficient funding offered to take on the event and uncertainty over the economic impact. Victoria's withdrawal last year and the lack of an obvious alternative has triggered debate about the future of the Games. In golf, there's a 3-way tie for the lead after 2 rounds at the European Tour's Singapore Classic. A course record 63 from Englishman Andy Sullivan handed him a share of the lead at 9 under, alongside Germany's Freddie Schott and countryman Richard Mansell. David Micheluzzi is the best placed Australian, sitting tied for 9th at 7 under. And Formula One team Williams has announced that Alex Albon will take over the car of his teammate Logan Sargent for the remainder of the Australian Grand Prix weekend. This crashed in the first free practice session on Friday. The car's chassis suffered extensive damage and the team has no replacement. It means they can only run one of two cars for the rest of the weekend. Team principal James Vowles has called the situation unacceptable in modern-day Formula One. And that is the latest in sport. Brendan?
A busy day. Thank you very much, Fraser Fife. Back with more in around half an hour's time. A quick look at the finance screens here on your All News Network. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has finished down 0.75%. The S&P 500 in America down 0.1%. But the Nasdaq Composite, it rose 0.16% to be at 16,428. Right now, one Australian dollar buying 65.1 US cents. That's down 0.4%. Spot gold down 0.75% as well at 2,164. Your capital city weather this Saturday, the 23rd of March. In Brisbane, 19 degrees right now. A possible shower and a high of 28. Becoming cloudy in Sydney, getting to 25. It's 16 right now. Canberra, 9, partly cloudy with a top of 23 on the way. Melbourne's 12, possible shower, a high of 21 predicted. A top of 21 also in Hobart, where it's 11 right now, partly cloudy to start the weekend. Adelaide's 14 to a high of 25, mostly sunny. 16 in Perth, sunny with a predicted maximum of 29 degrees. Darwin's 27, getting to 32 with a shower or two. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 8 o'clock, 7:30 in South Australia, 7 o'clock in Queensland, 6:30 in the Northern Territory. It's 5 a.m. in the West. Good morning.
ABC News with Tanmaya Navada. After months of speculation over her health, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has revealed she's been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing chemotherapy treatment. As Europe correspondent Catherine Diss reports, it follows the King's cancer diagnosis.
In an emotional video message released by Kensington Palace on Friday evening, Princess Catherine told the world it's been an incredibly tough few months.
This, of course, came as a huge shock. And William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family.
The 42-year-old's been on leave from public duties after undergoing major abdominal surgery in January. It was initially thought to be cancer. The type will not be disclosed. The Prince and Princess of Wales wanted to wait until their children broke from school for the Easter holidays before revealing the news publicly.
A US-led resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza has been defeated at the United Nations Security Council as America's top diplomat returns from a visit to Israel. Emily Gromans reports from Washington.
The US-led resolution supported a ceasefire and the release of hostages, but permanent members Russia and China vetoed it, saying its language was not strong enough. Hours before the vote, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Netanyahu remains committed to a military operation in Rafah, which Mr. Blinken warned him against.
It risks killing more civilians. It risks wreaking greater havoc with the provision of humanitarian assistance. It risks further isolating Israel.
An Israeli delegation is due to visit Washington next week.
Several gunmen have burst into a concert hall near Moscow and attacked people with automatic gunfire, which Russian state media says has killed at least 40 people and started a massive blaze. The apparent terror attack comes days after President Vladimir Putin cemented his grip on the country after being re-elected for a record fifth term. There were no immediate claims of responsibility for the raid. Russia's top domestic security agency says there are dead and wounded, but hasn't given any official numbers. Back home, 6 people have been arrested after a major police investigation recovered more than $100,000 worth of methamphetamine in Melbourne's north. Ahmed Yusuf reports.
Police made the arrest during raids on properties in Reservoir, Lalor and Epping last week and this week as part of a 7-month investigation. Detectives also seized more than 370 grams of methamphetamine, which they allege was being sold to the community. 3 people have been charged with a number of offences, including trafficking a commercial quantity of methamphetamine and dealing with a property suspected of being the proceeds of crime. 2 men aged 39 and 28, along with a 39-year-old woman, have all been remanded in custody. A 33-year-old man has been charged and released on bail, while 2 women aged 28 and 30 have been released pending summons.
Workers at one of Northern Territory's biggest mines will continue to be paid while operations are shut down due to flood damage. Groot Island's Gemco manganese mine has suspended operations after damaging wind and heavy rain damaged the wharf and a bridge and flooded the mine pit. The CFMEU Construction Union's NT organiser, Josh Burling, says it's not yet known how long it'll take to reopen.
Who knows how long it's going to be, but I would say, knowing that South 32, that mine there is one of the most profitable mines in the Southern Hemisphere, that they will be putting every effort into getting back online as soon as they can.
Voters in the inner eastern Adelaide seat of Dunstan are heading to the polls for a by-election triggered by the resignation of former Premier Stephen Marshall. Dunstan is South Australia's most marginal state seat, currently held by the Liberals on a 0.5% margin. 5 candidates are contesting today's election, which is being held at the midway point of the political term. More than 6,000 people have already cast early or postal votes. And British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has weighed in on a furore over the English soccer team's new shirts following Nike's decision to use an altered design of the St George Cross. Nike, which makes the kit for England's national soccer teams, unveiled its new design this week, which it said paid homage to the country's 1966 World Cup winning men's team. The shirt's collar features the St George's Cross, which is red on a white background, but in shades of red, blue and purple. Many fans are calling on Nike to scrap the new design, and Mr Sunak says the flag should not have been messed with. You're up to date with the latest from ABC News. For more news at any time, you can download the ABC Listen app.
You're listening to ABC News Radio.
It's Saturday, the 23rd of March. I'm Brendan Arrow. Still to come on your All News Network. Dozens killed in an attack in the Russian capital, Moscow. Princess Kate confirms she is being treated for cancer and calls for privacy during the treatment.
It has taken me time to recover from major surgery in order to start my treatment. But most importantly, it has taken us time to explain everything to George, Charlotte and Louis in a way that's appropriate for them and to reassure them that I'm going to be okay.
And here at home, polling stations are now open across Tasmania with almost 300,000 people to cast their vote in the state election today. We begin though with this developing news overseas. At least 40 people have been killed after gunmen attacked a packed concert venue on the outskirts of Moscow. More than 100 others have been wounded in the Crocus City Hall, where a Russian pop group was performing. Dramatic video shows packed concert goers taking cover as shots and explosions ring out. A large fire has also engulfed the roof of the complex, and Russia's National Guard is searching for the gunman, with the Kremlin saying that Ukraine is behind the attack, a claim authorities in Kyiv have strenuously denied. The BBC's Matthew Chance reports from Moscow.
We don't know the identity of the gunman. We don't know whether the situation's been neutralised yet, whether they've been killed or detained or anything like that. And we don't know how many people are trapped inside the building, which is on fire, as you can see from those images. We know that the roof has collapsed, according to Russian state television, and that doesn't bode well if there's anybody inside. But you saw those images of the auditorium. It was a pretty crowded auditorium with hundreds of people inside it. We know that 100 people have been injured, according to these preliminary figures, and at least 40 people have been killed. And I think the expectation is, although it's speculative, but the expectation is that figure could rise in the hours ahead.
And I'm seeing that RIA Novosti said that in terms of the fire, that they threw a grenade or incendiary, which then started a fire, which is why we're seeing these scenes. I also saw, Matthew, and I wonder if we can give me some context on this, that the US Embassy in Moscow had issued a security alert, I think it was 2 weeks ago, on March 7th. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, it was an extraordinarily prescient security alert. In retrospect, of course, it basically said, look, we are looking at intelligence which suggests an extremist attack will take place in the area, and it will be targeting places where lots of people gather. They said it was an imminent threat, and they mentioned concerts as being one possible target for these extremists that they said that they were monitoring. I mean, at the time, the Russian authorities essentially dismissed that warning from the US government and also from the British government as well, that issued a similar alert from their embassy in Moscow. Vladimir Putin calling it a provocation saying that it was intended to destabilise and intimidate our society, he said. But obviously, in retrospect, it seems that the intelligence that it may have had something to it. I've spoken to the US Embassy over the course of the past